Good morning, everybody. Today, I would like to give you guys a breakdown of Wolf of Wall Street through the lens of a complex adaptive system. The film that I will be covering is The Wolf of Wall Street. And first of all, I wanted to welcome you guys to my presentation, where I will be covering the application of complex adaptive systems as well as complex responsive processes in the film The Wolf of Wall Street. So, throughout this presentation, looking at how the film The Wolf of Wall Street clings to the aspects of complex adaptive systems and complex responsive processes. And for anyone unfamiliar with The Wolf of Wall Street, allow me to briefly explain this film. This film was released in 2013 by director Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Margaret Robbie, Matthew McConaughey, and Jonah Hill. This film has received multiple Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Director. I was given a lengthy list of movies to choose from. The Wolf of Wall Street drew me in due to the complex processes and adaptive systems within the movie, and it presented a good challenge for me for this assignment. I'd like to take a minute just to introduce myself and who I am. So my name is Scott Ron. I'm 31 years old. I hold a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership, which I received in May of 2022 from the University of Charleston in West Virginia. I'm currently studying a Master's of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies at the University of Texas State, which I hope to graduate in 2024. I'm also a member of the ROTC at the Texas State University. I'm a current active duty soldier, which my MOS is a combat engineer. I've been in the Army for about 11 years now. And I'm also currently taking a class titled Human Systems in the Workplace, which is titled AUCED 5361 here in the ALS program. And during this class, I have been learning about both complex adaptive systems as well as complex responsive processes. And I hope to share some of my knowledge as I cover The Wolf of Wall Street. Today, I'd like to summarize the film for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to watch it for themselves. And next, I'd like to define the elements that comprise a complex adaptive system, as well as the complex responsive processes, and some of the emergences that are taking place on separate. Lastly, we will look at the application of change process in local Wall Street and examine if the change is for better or for worse. In this film, The Wolf of Wall Street, we as an audience are introduced to the main character, Jordan Balfour, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And the film sets up the setting and context by walking us through Leonardo's character. He's a new and inexperienced stockbroker, learning from an all but comical, though jaded, experienced broker who's played by Matthew McConaughey. From this perspective, we can see clearly that there is already a schema and an expected role to be aligned with as a stockbroker. And one of the more comical scenes with the two actors, an awkward encounter with the two, shows McConaughey dabbling proudly in drugs and humming in a manner that pressures DiCaprio not only to play along, but not to question his actions in plain sight. Humor is added to the context for entertainment purposes, but highlights a more profound and ongoing adaptive system within the already complex brokerage system. McConaughey himself even mentions the idea of reinvesting within yourself and how it can act almost as an addiction. This idea preludes the ongoing trend of greed and adaptive systems as a married schema. One could say that stocks don't always have to include drugs. And while it is true, this film is an example of how an organization that already has its own limitations and rules can emerge and adapt into a completely different organism on its own, functioning off its own unwritten rules and growth, born from many less obvious actions and decisions. One clear example of emergence is the concept of a rat hole. In the film, DiCaprio becomes successful from continuing business the way that he has. He adapts, but creating a rat hole. And this rat hole is a person whom DiCaprio can hide and essentially launder his money through so he can reinvent himself without being caught. The way that he is going about this is, of course, illegal. A great example of the complex adaptive processes is how individual people interact independently. One example is how DiCaprio's assistant came to be. Independent interaction between the two of them outside of work, seemingly spontaneous, led to them becoming his assistant and right-hand man. And another clear example we can see in this film is adaptive systems. From the previous experience DiCaprio had before being laid off, he understood how assertive he needed to be in the stock market, almost as if he was in a sales role and not an advising role. He adapted to his new position, once working for penny stocks, and applied his knowledge, and from his success and ability to convince his investors, he developed a following from his peers. DiCaprio began to reinvest in himself, essentially by teaching others the game and leading them. And this mentality that DiCaprio had, coupled with the moral deficiencies, became a completely new approach to the Wall Street market. This emergence was a new role. DiCaprio is seen taking the cultural approach he was exposed to in the beginning with McConaughey to his new subordinates. Keeping his mentality earned him the name the Wolf of the Wall Street. By a news article written about him as part of the film's plot, this recognition was owned and celebrated by fellow peers, increased the company's desirability. This culture was its own complex adaptive system, and was the reason the characters got away with so much before their downfall. So let's take a look and dive into the main components of a complex adaptive system. And these components are agents, self-organization, rules, and emergence. Here we have a picture, which is the characteristics of a complex system. It is very complex if you're just looking at it. But let's just say, to begin, the agents are the individuals and entities that make up that complex adaptive system. Through agents interacting and adapting to one another, there's a behavioral pattern, commonly known as the population-wide pattern, which can emerge. And the next element is the self-organization. This is the process that agents undergo to develop new structures or patterns within their organization when the new dynamics occur. Third, we have rules, which may be obvious, but these are the behaviors by which system agents will act and undergo. And lastly, we will talk about emergence, which is the process when a number of agents operate in an environment forming more complex behaviors as a collective. Now that we have defined what a complex adaptive system is and what are the components that make it up, first off, I'd like to go into beginning with the agents on the Wolf of Wall Street, which is Jordan Belfort and the employees, and particularly the upper management of Stratton Oakmont. Through their interactions with each other, they're able to establish a large system to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars to secret bank accounts to ultimately fund their extravagant lifestyle. However, there's another agent that comes into play involved with the FBI Securities and Exchange Commission, who's working against Oakmont or Stratton Oakmont in order to stop them. And this moves into the next component, which is self-organization. Looking at the system, we can look at the casualty component as transformative, and say the system has multiple agents differing from one another. This means the system takes on a life of its own that is made true by Belfort opening up a brokerage firm where they sell reliable securities. After this, they loaded their sales with stocks, and they're not very reliable, and they're extremely risky to their investors, but their mental, their moral, and ethical dilemmas do not stop them. Ultimately, Donnie Azoff and Jordan Belfort bring Steve Madden into their money laundering scheme, and through this, Stranded Oakmont made millions of dollars by taking Steve Madden's shoe company, as explained by Woods. While successful for a time, it still crosses path with the other organizations known as the SEC and FBI. Belfort ultimately leads Oakmont to its failure by engaging in these risky behaviors that we talked about earlier, which was the substance abuse and the dysfunctional behaviors that he was setting within his company. These population-wide patterns led to the downfall of Stratton Oakmont. Although there was a lot of contributing factors, it's important for us to understand that leaders in any organization should be able to allow for the complex adaptive system to evolve, identify the shortcomings in the system before it is too late. I'd like to thank everybody for their time, taking 10 minutes out of their life to watch my presentation. And I hope you guys enjoyed my breakdown of the Wolf of Wall Street through the lens of a complex adaptive system and the complex responsive process. Thank you.